Welcome to Aviation Highlights. I'm Paul Pakusch. This is the June edition of Aviation Highlights, a monthly TV program about aviation in and around the Rochester area. We're behind Will Air West at the Rochester Airport, where an open house is going on right now for the Rochester Flying Club. Sue Giuseppetti has the story.
The Rochester Flying Club holds an annual open house at its hangars on Scottsville Road, usually during the month of May. Here, would-be pilots or pilots are given information about the club, such as benefits, costs, and dues. They are also given the opportunity to inspect the planes one by one. Aside from owning your own plane, pilots at the Rochester Flying Club say belonging to a club such as this is one of the most economical ways to go. I'm here with Mike Pelletier, who is president of the Rochester Flying Club. Mike, can you explain to us what the Rochester Flying Club does and what the benefits are to its pilots?
Well, basically, we are a non-profit organization, and we've been in operation for 30 years. We feel that we offer a pilot the most economical way to fly an aircraft. And what we do is we have a membership of very conscientious and able pilots who are interested in safety. And what we do is we all share equal costs on operating our particular fleet. There is no salaries involved. It's just operational type maintenance of the club and its equipment. And we do that for a cost that's at least 1/3 up to 1/2 the cost of what normally you would from the other traditional means, which is a fixed base operator or owning your own aircraft in a single or multiple party limited partnership. At the current time, we have approximately 60 members, and we try to maintain a ratio of no more than 15-to-1 members per aircraft. Right now, we're about 13.5 to 1.
And how many planes does that mean you own within the club?
Well, currently we have 5 aircraft. We have a high-performance Beechcraft Bonanza, which is a retractable gear and a constant speed prop. Then we have 3 Piper Archer 2s, which are 4-seat fixed gear, fixed prop. And then we have a Cessna 150 trainer aircraft, and all of them are behind us here. Well, basically with 5 aircraft, obviously 5 times 15 will be 75. The way we have it structured right now, that's an insurance limitation as well, but basically to keep good usability of the aircraft as well as good availability, we would probably go to about a 14-to-1 ratio, 15-to-1 ratio, which would be our top limit. And that's what we're striving for.
Is there a limit on how long you keep the aircraft that you own in the club?
No, it's one of changing priorities. With the deregulation of the aircraft, we used to have 2 Beechcraft Bonanzas because it was a lot cheaper to take the members and their families to go on vacations and to the Bahamas or down to Florida or out to the West Coast. We have wide, extensive flights that we have. With deregulation, it was cheaper to do it commercially on the long flights. So the mix of the aircraft changed from 2 Bonanzas and 2 Archers in the Cessna to 1 Bonanza. We had to add another Archer because the mix of the fleet, the use changed. And we would do the same thing now.
And how does the club work exactly? Do pilots get a certain amount of time, airtime per year?
No, what it is we have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week answering service, and it's based on first come, first serve. All the pilots have the aircraft available to them. They just call, reserve the aircraft. There are very few restrictions. Again, our philosophy is one of all our members use and maintain the aircraft as if it was their personal aircraft. And by and large, our members do exactly that. We maintain our aircraft to very high standards. We constantly improve them, and we keep them in top shape.
Is there a limit to the amount of time that a pilot in the club could use the aircraft, for instance, if they went on a trip?
We have a limit of 16 consecutive days that a member can reserve an aircraft for long-term trips, such as going cross-country or an extended stay down in Florida or things of that nature. Beyond that, then it gets one of availability for the membership as a whole, and that's a type of polite way of saying if you're going to do something along those lines, be considerate of the other members who also want to fly. If we go beyond 16 days, then you just apply to the club officers for approval. That rarely happens. Most people do what they're going to do well within those limits.
Now, what if someone was out of state and something happened to the plane? What would they do?
Well, basically, each one of the aircraft have club members which serve as quote-unquote crew chiefs, and they're responsible for the maintenance of the aircraft. When someone is out of state and they have to have some maintenance done, it's a matter of getting it done. They contact the crew chief or the vice president of maintenance, and they are authorized to go ahead and repair the aircraft and return it to base, which is Rochester. If they cannot, we go get it.
So they would pay for repairs out of their own pocket and then be reimbursed?
Oh no, all costs are covered totally by the fees within the club itself. There is no out-of-pocket expenses that the members have to pay themselves. If they do, they are reimbursed.
What do you see as the greatest benefit to a pilot belonging to the club aside from the economical benefits?
Aside from the economical benefits, the best thing is operating very well equipped, extremely well maintained, versatile aircraft, and having 5 of them available for use at any one time. It's consistency of the approach, having a lot of members with a good camaraderie available to help in training and practice and going on trips, sharing costs. We're a happy club.
Down to the nitty-gritty, how do people pay for this?
Well, basically our costs are split up into 2 structures. A fixed cost, which means those expenses which would incur if the aircraft didn't fly. And the second half of it would be the flying expenses that they use when they actually do fly, such as the answering service, the telephone, the corporate insurance policy that we have in all our members. Those type of expenses are on a monthly basis and everyone shares in them equally. The flying expenses basically are just that. We have a computerized billing system, and the people make out the log sheets for their flying time, and they are billed according to the type of aircraft that they use and the time they used.
What would be the average dollar amount that someone would spend yearly for the yearly dues and then also the monthly dues?
Well, basically that's a function of how much you fly. The average member flies around 22 hours a year in our club, 22, 23. So you multiply that times, say, in the Archers, $40, and you're talking about, say, about $900 a year. And add on top of that the cost for the monthly type of fees for our operation, and that would probably add another $500 to it. The total cost then, 500 plus the 900, so that's about $1,500 a year on the average. Basically, what we've done is the aircraft are not totally paid for. What we do is we have a corporate account with a bank, and we use that for a revolving account for fleet improvements, and then as part of the expenses we pay that off. We purchased a plane about 2-3 years ago, and of course we're still paying that part of it off. And also we do fleet improvements. What we do is we set up reserves for maintenance and engine replacement, which everybody has to do, and we use the bank as an account to finance that part of it. So in most respects, all our planes are paid for, but we just keep this account for our own benefit to make operations easier. And flux in and out. I mean, pilots are just like anything else. Some people come into it because they really want to be into it, and other people are into it because they have a goal in life. They want to be a pilot. They get their license and they use it a few times, and they say, well, I did my goal. If they have a real need for it, it's different. Then they come in, they go on trips, they do this, they do that, and it ends up, they stay.
This has been Sue Giuseppetti for Aviation Highlights.
It's time for the history portion of Aviation Highlights with Paul Roxin.
In 1936, there was a big project underway where they started to put in concrete runways at the airport, modernization of the airport, under the WPA program. And the airport was really a mess. You had to be very careful where you taxied. Very often you had to taxi on a runway and look out for planes that are going to land, because if you got off side you'd drop down 12 feet, things of that nature. But we were in expansion mode, And it was unfortunate. Politics got in the way of the development of the airport here because the federal government, which was a Democratic administration under Roosevelt, they wanted to put in a new administration, give the county, not the county, but the city, all the money to put up a new administration building on Brooks Avenue, where we are now. And because the city was Republican, they wouldn't play ball. And unfortunately, we all lost out in that particular respect, where other cities went ahead and put up new administration buildings. So we fell behind quite a bit. What we have here is a walk left that belonged to Ray Holland. The picture was taken in the summer 1934, and the odd-looking character on the left happens to be myself. The center is Baron Brodeen, and to the right is Elmer Page. In 1941, Barron went to work for Curtis Wright in Buffalo, and he was a service representative for the P-40, which was being used by the Flying Tigers in the Pacific. After Pearl Harbor, he had a private license. He was commissioned by the Air Force as a second lieutenant, and we understand that he shot down 2 fighter planes in the South Pacific before he was killed himself. I believe that was in January 1942. And to the right is Elmer Page, who, with Jim Womack, founded Page Airways, which went on to become one of the large corporate land-based operators in the country. It isn't a very good picture, but that plane is a D. Seversky plane built by Major D. Seversky, who came from Russia originally, and he founded Republic Aircraft, which went on to build the P-47 Thunderbolt fighter. But that's the prototype. That is the design upon which that famous fighter was based. This picture was taken about 1934, and of course the fighter didn't come out about 1940.
On May 18th, President Bush came to the city of Rochester. We took some time out to go out and get some pictures of Air Force One. Air Force One is one of 2 Boeing 707s with the Air Force designation C-137C. It is specially designed to carry a passenger and crew load of 64 and is partitioned into several sections, including a communications center, the presidential quarters, a staff and office compartment, and space for some members of the news media. The C-137C cruises at 540 miles per hour at a maximum altitude of 42,000 feet. Its range is 5,757 miles. When the President is aboard any Air Force aircraft, the radio call sign is Air Force One. The Boeing 707-353B that we see here is number 27,000. It was accepted by the Air Force on August 4, 1972, and first used by President Nixon on February 8, 1973. It was also used by Presidents Ford, Carter, and Reagan, and is now being used by President Bush. The other Boeing 707, number 26,000, went into service on October 12, 1962. This was the aircraft on which President Kennedy flew to Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963. His body returned in it to Washington, D.C. following his assassination. It was also used by Presidents Johnson and Nixon. Aircraft number 26,000 is now the backup presidential aircraft. In late 1989 or early 1990, aircraft number 27,000 will be replaced by a new Boeing 747, Air Force designation VC-25A. Its tail number will be 28,000. The aircraft will have a passenger and crew capacity of 93, a range of 7,140 miles, and aerial refueling capability. It will cruise at 560 miles per hour at a maximum altitude of 42,000 feet. It will have a built-in air stair and baggage loader system. The executive suite will contain a stateroom, dressing room, and lavatory. A private office will be near the stateroom, and there will also be a combination conference and dining room. Separate accommodations will be provided for guests, staff members, Secret Service and security, and news media. 2 galleys will serve up to 100 meals in one sitting. The crew has its own compartment, and there will be another compartment for medical supplies. A lot of people have a fear of flying, but some people have to fly in spite of their fear because of family travel or business reasons. USAIR Airlines has a program to help people deal with their fear of flying. Picture this, if you will. You've made arrangements to travel by air in a few weeks. During those few weeks, you have nightmares about flying. You have problems sleeping. And on the day of the flight, you need a drink or a tranquilizer in order to relax on the plane. If this sounds like you, then you're one of 25 million Americans who have a fear of flying. USAIR sponsors a 7-week class for fearful flyers who would like to overcome their fear. Clinical social worker Carol Stauffer and veteran pilot Captain Frank Petit teach the class and have written a book about fear of flying for people who are unable to take the class.
We have 3 groups of people in the classes. We get a few who have never flown, and they're easy to cure because by the time they're finished our class, they're going to be real familiar and comfortable on an airplane. We're in airplanes 4 of the 7 nights. Then we get a group of people who flew at one time and for some reason did not like it, became scared, and decided not to fly again. They may have had what they thought was a frightening experience, did not understand enough about it, and just gave up flying. The largest group of people we have are the white-knuckled flyers. They're dragging themselves on airplanes by alcohol, tranquilizers, or sheer grit, but they're getting on airplanes, but they hate it. They often have nightmares about it or can't sleep weeks in advance, and they want to do something about it. It's a 2-part program, and that's why Frank and I are partners in this. It's behavior modification and aviation education. And I'm a clinical social worker, so I'm responsible for the behavior modification. That's relaxation training based on the theory you can't be tense and relaxed at the same time. So we're going to teach these people how to relax and become so good at it that they can do it even on an airplane. I also teach them a therapy called thought stopping. Some of these people have had fearful thought patterns for years and years, and it's reinforcing their fear. Then the other part of my job is the desensitization, and that also overlaps into Frank's part. That's getting them gradually comfortable again on an airplane. The first 2 classes are held in a conference room here at the airport, but the 3rd night we begin taking them on an airplane.
So what happens with your end of the class?
As Carol said, aviation education is a big part of it, and these people learn more about airplanes and flying, and especially airline operations, than most lay people ever do. And they're very concerned about quite a few things. They're concerned about weather. They're concerned about rain and snow and lightning, and especially concerned about turbulence. We probably discuss turbulence more than anything else as far as the weather is concerned. They're concerned about the noises on the airplane. Many of these people in the class are just, they fear every little sound that comes up. So we talk about sounds a good bit during the program. And we end up with I think pretty well convincing them that there are no sounds they have to worry about, that they might as well just forget about being worried about sounds. They're concerned about where the pilots come from, how experienced they are, how we train them, how we keep them trained. So we go into details on that sort of thing too.
Do you think most of what you're talking about with the commercial airlines could also apply to smaller aircraft and the other airlines besides USAIR?
Oh, sure. Any airline could do this, and we kind of wish other airlines would, because we can't get to more than 10 cities a year as it is. It's about all we can do. So we'd like to have some other airlines get into it. And much of what we talk about in the classes applies also to small airplanes. And quite often people in the class will ask if something does apply to light airplanes. Because some of them are, they're more concerned about flying in small airplanes than they are with the airline airplanes. It's very interesting when people come to our class the first night and they are absolutely amazed to see all those other people there. Like Carol told the class recently that we had one person that said the first night that she came to the class that she thought that she would be the only one there, maybe a couple old bag ladies or something. That'd be about the whole class, and I think in that particular class there were about 35 people. So the people find out that there are many, many others that have the same fears they do.
What's the feeling as people walk in the first time? Do they stand at the door and hesitate to come in?
The claustrophobics do. Sometimes we have to entice people to come in. Oftentimes people will even have someone else drive them to the airport. Just coming to the airport sets off all those old feelings. You know, the fast-beating heart and the sweaty palms. We had a gentleman in our Washington class who had not flown for 7 years. Just looking at an airplane up in the sky set off all those horrible feelings for him. Took the course, graduated on a Saturday in Washington, D.C., and on Sunday left for South Africa. So he was cured in 7 weeks. Lots of the people think it's not going to work. How are we going to do this in 7 weeks? So they get themselves here the first night, but then think, I'm not going to be on that graduation flight. But we know they will be. We know it does work.
And of course, Carol said we have a 97% success rate. So that first night, a lot of people are saying, well, I'll be in that other 3%. But it's really just the people who, some of them who don't come to the meetings and don't listen to the relaxation tape at least once every day. Carol tells them that that's all you have to do. Come to the meetings and use your tape at least once every day, and the rest is up to us.
Can you give me an example of some of your relaxation techniques and how you help people deal with their nervousness?
Sure. The relaxation training is a very important part of the program, because if you don't learn a new response to flying, that you can be relaxed and comfortable on that airplane, you won't even be able to remember the information, the good aviation education that we've given to the people. So progressive relaxation is first learning the difference between a tense muscle group and a relaxed muscle group. So each class member is given a tape, and they do have to practice once a day during the course. What happens is they practice the tape to get over the fear of flying, but they use it for everything else in their life. They're better able to function at work. Their husband or wife says they don't yell as much, they're calmer, whatever. A lot of our people, too, have some other fears. Frank mentioned the fear of not being in control of the situation. Also claustrophobia. So if you're claustrophobic in an airplane, you probably don't like elevators or tunnels or the subway, whatever. So they use the relaxation for other things. So they practice for the 7 weeks, become very good at doing it. They're going to be able to do it on an airplane also. Then along with that, we teach them the thought stopping, and that helps them change their way of thinking. You know, most people don't hear anything about the positive side of flying. All they hear in the media is when anything goes wrong. So we're teaching them all the new information, the other side of flying. The fact, for example, that 18,000 commercial airliners take off and land every single day in the U.S. without a serious incident. So we're helping them to get some new information to replace the old scary thoughts. So those two, combined with what we call the desensitization, gradually getting comfortable on an airplane. The first night we're on the airplane, we leave the door open, and that's for the claustrophobics. So they're going to relax for 15 minutes on an airplane with the door open. The 5th night of class, we go back on an airplane and close the door. The 6th night of class, we move that airplane. We taxi around the airfield and do a rejected takeoff. The 7th night of class is a 1-hour graduation flight. So we're gradually getting them a new response to that airplane and a comfortable response.
If you would like to know more about USAIR's Fearful Flyers program or the book written by Captain Frank Petit and Carol Stauffer, write to them at USAIR, Post Office Box 100, Glenshaw, Pennsylvania 15116. In the July edition of Aviation Highlights, we will discuss some specific fears in Part 2 of our series on Fearful Flyers. That's it for the June edition of Aviation Highlights. I'm Paul Pakusch along with Sue GIUSEPPETTI. Join us again in the month of July for another edition of Aviation Highlights.